Greetings. My name is James McKim. I am president of the Manchester branch of the NAACP and a member of the New Hampshire MLK Coalition. The coalition's members include diverse local organizations dedicated to carrying on the work of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. to end racism, eliminate poverty, and promote peace through active nonviolence. You can see a list of these organizations on our website at mlknh.org. On behalf of the coalition, it is my honor and pleasure to welcome you to the 39th Martin Luther King Day celebration. As you are watching this either from your web browser or on Manchester Public Access TV, you know that we are not in person. Many experts say the COVID-19 pandemic is at its peak. As a result, the coalition has chosen to err on the side of caution and not hold an in-person event. But we will not be deterred from celebrating the extraordinarily inspirational life of Dr. King. In addition to the pandemic, since our last celebration, we have seen many heart-wrenching events, from the killings of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and others, to the storming of the Capitol building in Washington, D.C. The words of healing and philosophy of Dr. King are needed more today than ever. I've been reflecting recently on his philosophy, and his following words came to mind. Hatred paralyzes life. Love releases it. Hatred confuses life. Love harmonizes it. Hatred darkens life. Love illuminates it. So many people think of and thought of Dr. King as a fighter for equality for Black people. But if you read his writings and listen to his speeches, you know that he was striving for something much, much bigger. Life. Abundant, harmonious, joyous life for everyone, regardless of your race, creed, religion, or color. This way to look at life, this philosophy of love, is the theme of this year's celebration. Love is greater than hate. The planning committee has designed this event to explore this theme with a fabulous program that follows the traditions established by our previous MLK Day celebrations. In fact, it uses footage from some of those previous celebrations. You will see a Pledge of Allegiance. You'll see a reading of the governor's proclamation. You'll see and hear from the Manchester Central High School Band. You'll see a ringing of bells reflecting the thought of Let Freedom Ring. You'll see the New Hampshire MLK Virtual Choir singing Lift Every Voice and Sing. We have a tribute to past awardees of our MLK Award. We'll have a reading of the 1967 speech by Dr. King of Where Do We Go From Here, read by 11 different readers from across our great state. Then we'll hear closing remarks from Rabbi Beth Davidson from Temple Adeth Yeshurun. Finally ending with a rendition of We Shall Overcome. We invite you to sing along at home or wherever you are at any time the Spirit moves you. And at approximately 2:50 p.m. today, please join us for an open discussion of where we go from here, based on that speech that he gave in 1967. You can view a recording of that speech and find the link to participate in the discussion on our website, mlknh.org. We give thanks to our financial sponsors, the Manchester Education Association, and Will Thomas, who gave in honor of Vanessa Johnson, Sandra Hicks, and Dr. Marie Matoyer, who passed this year. This event would not be possible without their support. It would also not be possible without the work of the MLK Coalition Organizing Committee. Maxine Mosley, our coalition chair, who drives the event every year. Reverend Jason Wells of the New Hampshire Council of Churches for putting together the recording you are watching. Members Ellen Bellinger, Alice Cassidy, Rabbi Beth Davidson, Maggie Fogarty, David Holt, DJ Krasner, Carolyn Sanchez, Will Thomas, and Lillian Wainaina. Special thanks to Mr. Ed Doyle, music teacher from Central High School, for bringing us the Central Band, and Mr. Josh DeRochers, music teacher from Goffstown High School, for stitching together the virtual MLK choir. Dr. King left us a great legacy of sacrifice and service. He calls us even today to follow in his footsteps. I encourage you all to think about how you will heed his call as you enjoy the rest of the program.
Please join us in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
under God, indivisible, with liberty.
The State of New Hampshire by His Excellency Christopher T. Sununu, Governor. A proclamation. In the year of our Lord 2021, Martin Luther King Jr. Civil Rights Day, January 18th, 2021. Whereas the Civil Rights Act of 1964 recognized the importance of diversity, non-discrimination, and freedom by prohibiting discrimination based on race in employment and education, and outlawing racial segregation in public facilities. And whereas the Bill of Rights states that no state shall deprive any person of life, liberty, or property, nor deny to any person within the jurisdiction the equal protection of the law. And whereas in New Hampshire, we embrace our cultural diversity and work diligently to ensure that all of our citizens can live by our state motto, live free or die. And whereas New Hampshire's Martin Luther King Jr. Civil Rights Day recognizes the work, spirit, and vision of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and helps us to remember his many important, inspiring words. One of his most famous quotes where he states, "I look to a day when people will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character," has resonated with countless generations and is the standard by which we should all aspire to. And whereas Dr. King was instrumental in working with many other civil rights leaders to raise awareness for those being discriminated against, and his words, work, and actions have been emulated by citizens across our great nation who also work towards justice and equality for all people. And whereas the state of New Hampshire is proud to recognize the important and inspiring work of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Now, therefore, I, Christopher T. Sununu, Governor of the State of New Hampshire, do hereby proclaim January 18th, 2021 as Martin Luther King Jr. Civil Rights Day in the State of New Hampshire, and urge all citizens to recognize, encourage, and support the end of racial segregation and discrimination in their local communities and across the state.
Thank you, everyone.
Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring, ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of our new day begun, let us march on till victory is won.
Stony the road we trod, given to chasing rod, held in the days when all unborn had died. Yet with a steady beat and our weary feet, come to the place for which our Father's sight. We have come o'er a way that with tears has been watered. We have come treading our path through the blood of the slaughtered. Out from the gloomy past till we stand at last, where the white gleam of our bright star is cast.
God of our weary years, God of our silent tears, thou who hast brought us thus far on the way, thou who hast by thy might led us into the light, keep us forever in the path we pray. Bless our feet straight from the places, our God, where we met thee. Bless our hearts, drunk with the wine of the world, we forget thee. Shadowed beneath thy hand, may we forever stand, true to our God, true to our native land.
This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine, yeah. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. And everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine, yeah. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.
And the other thing is, I'm concerned about a better world. I'm concerned about justice. I'm concerned about brotherhood. I'm concerned about truth.
Truth. And when one is concerned about that, he can never advocate violence. For through violence, you may murder a murderer, but you can't murder murder. Through violence, you may murder a liar, but you can't establish truth. Through violence, you may murder a hater, but you can't murder hate through violence.
Darkness cannot put out darkness. Only light can do that. And I say to you, I've also decided to stick with love, for I know that love is ultimately the only answer to mankind's problems.
And I'm going to talk about it everywhere I go. I know it isn't popular to talk about it in some circles today.
And I'm not talking about emotional bosh when I talk about love. I'm talking about a strong, demanding love, for I have seen too much hate. I want to say to you as I move to my conclusion, as we talk about where do we go from here, that we must
honestly face the fact that the movement must address itself to the questions of restructuring the whole of American society. There are 40 million poor people here. And one day we must ask the question, why are there 40 million poor people in America?
And when you begin to ask that question, you are raising a question about the economic system, about a broader distribution of wealth. When you ask that question, you begin to question the capitalistic economy. And I'm simply saying that more and more, we've got to begin to ask questions about the whole society. We are called upon to help the discouraged beggars in life's marketplace.
But one day, we must come to see that an edifice which produces beggars needs restructuring. It means that questions must be raised. And you see, my friends, when you deal with this, you begin to ask the question, who owns the oil? You begin to ask the question, and who owns the iron ore? You begin to ask the question, why is it that people have to pay for water bills in a world that's 2/3 water? These words that must be said.
Now, when I say questioning the whole society, it means ultimately coming to see that the problem of racism, the problem of economic exploitation, and the problem of war are all tied together. These triple evils are interrelated. And I must confess, my friends, that the road ahead will not always be smooth. There will still be rocky places of frustration and meandering points of bewilderment. There will be inevitable setbacks here and there. And there will be those moments when the buoyancy of hope will be transferred into the fatigue of despair.
Our dreams will sometimes be shattered and our ethereal hopes blasted. We may again, with tear-drenched eyes, have to stand before the bier of some courageous civil rights worker whose life will be snuffed out by the dastardly acts of bloodthirsty mobs. But difficult and painful as it is, we must walk in on the days ahead with an audacious faith in the future. When our days
And as we continue our charted course, we may gain consolation from the words so nobly left by that great black bard, who was also a great freedom fighter of yesterday, James Weldon Johnson. Stony the road we trod, bitter the chastening rod, felt in the days when hope unborn had died. Yet with a steady beat have not our weary feet come to the place for which our fathers sighed? We have come over a way that with tears have been watered. We have come treading our path through the blood of the slaughtered. Out from the gloomy past, till now we stand at last where the bright gleam of our bright star is cast. Let this
affirmation be our ringing cry. It will give us the courage to face the uncertainties of the future. It will give our tired feet new strength as we continue our forward stride toward the city of freedom. When our days become dreary with low hovering clouds of despair, and when our nights become darker than 1,000 midnights, let us remember that there is a creative force in the universe working to pull down the gigantic mountains of evil, a power that is able to make a way out of no way and transform dark yesterdays into bright tomorrows. Let us realize that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. Let us realize that William Cullen Bryant was right, or is right. Truth crushed to earth will rise again. Let us go out realizing that the Bible is right. Be not deceived. God is not mocked.
Whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap. This is our hope for the future. And with this faith, we will be able to sing in some not too distant tomorrow, with cosmic past tense. We have overcome. We have overcome. Deep in my heart, I did believe we would overcome.
Deep in my heart, I did believe we would overcome.
Good afternoon. My name is Beth D. Davidson, and I am the Rabbi of Temple Adath Yeshurun here in Manchester, New Hampshire. TAY was an early member of the MLK Coalition, and we have been a proud participant in this celebration of the life and message of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King since its inception. I am honored to be part of our celebration today. This year, coming together to celebrate Dr. King and his legacy wasn't easy. Our world, our country, our community is having to confront issues of pandemic and prejudice. All of us have been touched somehow by COVID-19, and I believe all of us were touched by the tragic murders of Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, Rayshard Brooks, and other African Americans who were killed or wounded because of the color of their skin. 2020 may have just ended, but I fear that prejudice against and denigration of people of color will not end unless and until we take up the charge to be the change. Clearly, we all need to become points of light, for as our new year began, we were forcibly reminded what the powers of hate and intolerance can do. Our capital and our democracy were assaulted by a bunch of thugs. We cannot ignore the disgraceful fact that the security preparations for Black Lives Matter marches and demonstrations held last year were wildly different than what met those who attacked the Capitol last week. If we can look beyond this instance of institutional racism for just a moment, I believe that all Americans, whatever their color, should be horrified by what transpired last Wednesday. We can pray that the upcoming inauguration will take place without further violent interruption, that as a nation we will enjoy a moment of peaceful transition that expresses our hopes for our future. But prayer is not enough in the face of insurrection, just as it is not sufficient in response to racial injustice. Where do we get our hope, our energy, our vision to move forward? There are times I think that we have to listen to voices from the past. In my mind's eye, I carry a picture of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. marching arm in arm with Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel in 1965, as they prayed with their feet, marching from Selma to Montgomery in support of voting rights. If you have never seen this picture, let me invite you to the Jewish Federation of New Hampshire's Film Festival, which, in conjunction with the Manchester MLK Coalition, is sponsoring 2 free films in the next few weeks. The first, Shared Legacies, the African American Jewish Civil Rights Alliance, screens on January 28th through 31st. The crucial historical lessons of Black Jewish cooperation are revisited and re-examined in this utterly fascinating, urgent call to action. The second film is Joachim Prinz, I Shall Not Be Silent, which screens February 1st through 4th. Directly before Martin Luther King Jr.'s iconic I Have a Dream speech, Rabbi Joachim Prinz declared that bigotry and hatred are not the most urgent problem. The most urgent, the most disgraceful, the most shameful, and the most tragic problem is silence. The rabbi, a German Jewish refugee forced to flee his home in 1937, knew this lesson firsthand. When the racism against African Americans reminded him of the treatment of Jews in Nazi Germany, Prinz became a key ally of Dr. King. These movies do more than teach us history. While they remind us what can be accomplished when minorities work together, the movies challenge us to act, as we cannot be silent in the face of injustice. A powerful reminder and charge that is as important today as it was 60 years ago. For more information on these films, you can go to the MLK Coalition website or the JFNH website. 2,000 years ago, Rabbi Tarfon taught, "It is not incumbent upon you to complete the work, but neither are you free to abstain from it." His, too, is a voice from the past, but it instructs us that while we may not be able to personally bring an end to racial injustice and other forms of intolerance, prejudice, and hatred, we may not throw up our hands and walk away. Each of us needs to be involved, doing what we can, no matter how big or how small. It is our responsibility to build a society that doesn't make decisions about its members based on the color of one's skin. It is our responsibility to ensure that everyone has equal access to health care, good schools, higher education, and a job market that will welcome them. It is our responsibility to remember that all people are created in the image of God and are thus deserving of respect. We are our brothers and sisters' keepers, and we have to treat people the way we ourselves want to be treated. We don't have to finish the work of transforming society, but we do have to participate in doing the hard work that will move our nation forward. We can volunteer our time, energy, and financial resources to support organizations that work for the good of our country and all its people. We can remain actively engaged in our political system, supporting and casting our ballots for candidates who share our views and who will work for justice and an end to systemic prejudice. We must challenge those who make hateful statements or tell unacceptable jokes at the water fountain when we're standing at them once again, or today on Zoom or social media. We can teach, preach, and live a message of racial, gender, and ethnic equality as we help make change in our businesses, our institutions, and our neighborhoods. Above all, we cannot sit back and wait for someone else to do what must be done. This is a crucial piece of the Reverend Dr. King's message. We each have to roll up our sleeves and do what we can. Earlier in our program, you heard members of the MLK Coalition, past recipients of the MLK Coalition Award, and local politicians give voice to his call from the past as they read excerpts from the Reverend Dr. King's speech, "Where do we go from here?" In closing, I'd like to share a little more of that speech. His words ring as loudly today as they did when he first delivered this speech at a Southern Christian Leadership Conference in 1967. What I'm saying today is that we must go from this convention and say, "America, you must be born again." And so I conclude by saying today that we have a task, and let us go out with a divine dissatisfaction. Let us be dissatisfied until America will no longer have a high blood pressure of creeds and an anemia of deeds. Let us be dissatisfied until the tragic walls that separate the outer city of wealth and comfort from the inner city of poverty and despair, this shall be crushed by the battering rams of the forces of justice. Let us be dissatisfied until those who live on the outskirts of hope are brought into the metropolis of daily security. Let us be dissatisfied until slums are cast into the junk heaps of history and every family will live in a decent, sanitary home. Let us be dissatisfied until men and women, however black they may be, will be judged on the basis of the content of their character, not on the basis of the color of their skin. Let us be dissatisfied. Let us be dissatisfied until from every city hall justice will roll down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. Let us be dissatisfied until that day when nobody will shout white power, when nobody will shout black power, but everybody will talk about God's power and human power. Our society still needs us to use our dissatisfaction and our power to make change happen, though prayer asking for God's support never goes amiss. This past year, we lost the voices of John R. Lewis, C.T. Vivian, and Bruce Boynton. We have to lift up our voices in their stead and hopefully inspire new young voices to join us as we continue to try to create a country in which each and every man, woman, and child can sit, regardless of their color, under their vines and fig trees, in security, in comfort, and in peace. Today we honor the legacy of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., but honoring isn't enough. We must take up his challenge that darkness cannot put out darkness. Only light can do that. And we must commit ourselves to being and lighting such lights.
We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe that we shall overcome someday. We'll walk